Are you still grouping your students by reading level? Here's why that might be holding them back and what you can do instead to see real progress in your reading groups. Now, reading groups are one of the hardest parts of instruction in the K-2 classroom. You've got kids that are all over the place as far as what they need, but somehow you are supposed to give them exactly what it is they need in small groups. Now, I've definitely been there too. I've worked in classrooms that have multiple grade levels and ages, not just like all first grade or all second grade. So I've really struggled to figure out a way to give my students what it is that they really need, but make it manageable in the classroom setting for a teacher that has 20 or 30 kids. So what changed for me was moving away from grouping my students by reading level and instead grouping them by skill. So today I'm going to show you exactly how that works. Now, grouping by reading level is typically how it's been done. It's how I was taught to do it when I went through teacher education. It's how I was grouped when I was a student in school. And I didn't learn anything new until I actually got into reading intervention, working with dyslexic students, and learning all about the science of reading and structured literacy. So it's well known, it's easy to do. A lot of schools and programs follow this method, so it's like our go-to for most people. However, reading is not one skill. You may have a student who's reading on level, but they're still struggling with specific phonics skills such as decoding digraph words or blending consonant sounds together. Other students may be struggling with fluency or comprehension. So when we group by level, we're often mixing in together kids who actually have different needs. And that's really what makes small group time overwhelming and difficult to manage. So let's talk about what skill-based grouping is. You may have heard of this before because it's really popular to do in the science of reading community. And it just means that you're grouping students based on the skill they need to work on right now. So here are some examples. One group is working on phonemic awareness, specifically blending and segmenting. Another group that's focused on phonics may be working on vowel teams or multisyllabic words. Another group can be working on their comprehension by practicing retelling or inferencing skills. Basically, everyone in that group is working on one specific skill because it's the skill that they need help with, and that helps you focus on teaching one skill to that group. In this way, we're actually meeting students where they are. So let's talk about the science behind it, because this approach is not random. As I mentioned earlier, it's common in the science of reading community because it is backed by science, it is backed by the research. Let's take a look at Scarborough's reading rope, which hopefully you've seen by now, but if not, this will be a great introduction. So this diagram here shows you that there are many sub-skills involved to reach reading comprehension. We have two main strands, language comprehension and word recognition. And within each of those strands, it's broken down even more into all the individual areas and sub-skills that need to be mastered in order to have true reading comprehension. So you can see that the way the diagram is created, that these are intertwined, they work together. And so you need to have them all working together so that you can have reading comprehension. So you can see language comprehension is a big one. You've got background knowledge, vocabulary, language structures, verbal reasoning, literacy knowledge. All of those are different sub-skills that you can target in your small reading groups. And then you have word recognition, which is typically what you're focusing on in the K-2 setting, phonological awareness, decoding, and sight recognition. So even within each of those categories, you can break it down even more, right? Within decoding, within sight recognition, what specific types of words can you be working on? So that's what you want to look for so that you can group your kids. We also have the National Reading Panel report, which identified the 5 core components of reading instruction, which is phonemic awareness, phonics, fluency, vocabulary, and comprehension. Then we have Aries phases of reading development, which you may or may not have heard of, but I think this is a fantastic graphic to show you the different levels of where students are in their reading development and what specifically you can work on within each phase. So the first one is the pre-alphabetic phase, which is typically going to be like before pre-K and before. So really like knowing general print concepts, recognizing incidental visual features of words, but there's no letter sound knowledge here. So this is where kids can like pretend to read a book. They know how to hold a book, how to flip the pages. They know that there are letters and words, but that's about as much as they know. Then we have the early alphabetic phase where they know some letter sound knowledge, so they can maybe identify some letters, maybe some of the sounds. There's early phonological and phonemic awareness skills, developing like being able to split words into syllables or blend syllables together, onset and rhyme, matching initial sounds. Then we have the later alphabetic phase where some sight words are now, or some words are now automatic, so they're not decoding. Some words they just see and instantly know what the words are. They're using letter sound knowledge, so now they are decoding. They know that when they see the letter C, it usually makes a k sound, so they start to decode words like that. And they have more basic phonemic awareness. They can blend and segment like 3 to 4 phonemes together. Then there's the consolidated alphabetic phase, and this is where they continue to develop their sight word recognition. So now more and more words are read on sight, meaning they're not actually decoding the words. They're using orthographic mapping links, word families, syllable patterns, morphemes. So they are approaching new and unfamiliar words with the skills they know on how to break the word down. They're not decoding every single word sound by sound. They're using things like prefixes or syllables, or for example, they read the word mat and now you have the word pat, so they're not having to decode again the at part, things like that, where they're starting to transfer their knowledge to read words in chunks instead of by individual sounds. And they can demonstrate more advanced phonemic awareness skills like deletion, substituting of sounds, reversal of phonemes, and so on. So looking at where your students are and the skills that they need, you can see the things that you need to work on based on this chart here. So I think this is really very helpful. Now, when we target these skills directly, students will build automaticity and confidence. This is what we need to be working on when we have our students in their small reading groups. So let me give you a couple of specific examples. Let's say you have a group of students who are still struggling with blending. You can give them Okonen boxes and have them tap out sounds and blend them together with the sound boxes. Let's say you have another group that is working on vowel teams, and they can be practicing word mapping, phoneme grapheme mapping with words that have AI and AY. Let's say another group is struggling with fluency, so you can give them a decodable text or fluency grids that are at their current phonics skills. So let's say they're working on CBC words, then it would be a decodable text or fluency grids focused on that CBC skill. And they will practice reading and rereading these texts. So basically every group is getting exactly what they need, and you're not juggling a bunch of different skills in one group. It really will help reduce your planning time and prep and all that, because you're not having to do a bunch of different things. It's really just one specific skill you're working on. Now, how do you get started? If you're wondering, this sounds great, amazing, but how do I transition to this? It's really not that complicated. It's actually quite simple. The first thing you want to do is assess your students, which you've probably already done. Most schools have some sort of standard assessment that they do at the beginning of the year, like DIBELS, AIMSweb. Maybe you use something like the Quick Phonics survey. All of those are really helpful. It can be a very short, quick assessment. It doesn't have to be anything lengthy, but really you just want to be able to identify what deficits your students have when it comes to reading. Are they struggling with phonemic awareness? Are they struggling with decoding? Are they struggling with encoding? And then from there, you can break it down a little more. Now, once you've assessed your students, you can start to group them based on this data. So you're going to look at what they have in common, try to find the lowest mastered skill, and group according to that. So you may have multiple groups on the same skill, because maybe you have 10 kids that are working on this one skill. You're going to split those up into like 2 groups. And you may have to group some students together that they're not exactly the same skill, but they're close enough in the scope and sequence that you can combine them. Or maybe you've got a really wide variety of skills. So I've had, for example, students who were in middle school who were still reading at a first grade level. So when I have a couple of kids like that, where they should be closer to like 6th grade level, but I've got a kindergarten, 1st, 3rd, I would pull those into one group. Those kids are so low that they really need like one-on-one intervention, but I would pull those into one group, and I would work on the same skill, but maybe give them different word lists, right? A different passage to work on, but they're all working on, let's say, blending and segmenting or mapping the words. So you're giving them the same skill, but it is different text that they are using. So once they're grouped, you are going to plan one targeted skill per group and base your lesson plan around that. And then you will need to reassess regularly to determine if students will move to a different group or not, and obviously adjust your instruction. Skill-based groups are flexible and responsive, so your students do not stay in the same groups the whole year. They are moving around as needed. Now, if you're ready to get started with this and you want to know exactly step-by-step how to do it and see a tool that will make this really easy for you, then watch this video next. How to use data to plan small group reading instruction. In this video, I show you exactly how to do it in 6 steps and a tool that I use to make it so much easier.